Welcome to r/Credit by Haunted TTS. Subscribe and like this video for more, and don't forget to click that bell button for notifications. What is a supernatural event that happened in your life that just cannot be explained? One night I had a dream about my grandpa, who had died almost 20 years prior. We were in his home, and he kept telling me we need to clean the house, we need to get the house ready. When I asked him why, he just said she's coming home. My grandma, his wife of 50 years, died the next day. A family friend of ours, Gary, was terminally ill with cancer. He was a father figure to me and one of the few adult males from my previous life. I am a recovering alcoholic that fully understood me. A friend and myself were in Moab, Utah, and found a hostel to sleep in for the night. I had a dream about Gary. He looked amazing, completely healthy and backlit, and was wearing a multicolored sweater. He looked at me with concern in his eyes, pointed backwards and said, "I'm not doing too good." I woke up a bit shaken because it felt so real. I told my girlfriend about the dream and she asked if I needed to call my mom to see how he was doing. I told her that it wasn't necessary because I knew they would call me if Gary passed. That day we drove from Utah to Colorado and stayed in another hotel. About 5 a.m. I woke up and my phone was ringing. I could see that it was my mom and I already knew what she was going to tell me. She broke the news that Gary had passed, and I basically explained to her that Gary came and told me goodbye. I'm tearing up Earl right now writing this. The picture that his wife picked for his obituary was Gary in that multicolored sweater he was wearing when he came to me in my dream. At a premonition I'd be involved in a car accident one morning on the way to work as I got out of bed. It was a very strange thought, and I considered taking an alternate route but did not. As I got onto the highway it was raining, and a car flew past me, hydroplaned, and slammed into my car. Working as night security for a small office at a sanitation plant. Building was a single entrance, and you had to check in at the security station to get in or out. A worker shows up and checks in saying he needs to take care of a few things and grab some stuff. So I check in his ID and flip a few lights for him, then go back about my business. Fast forward a few hours and my shift is about to end. I still haven't seen the guy come back. So I go patrol the building to find him and literally can't find him anywhere. He's not in any of the areas I turned lights on for him, no other lights are on, and he's not in any other rooms. I stop by security to see if we just missed each other and he's trying to leave, but nobody is there. I do a second patrol and still no signs. At this point I went to check cameras to see where he went, but he's not on a single camera except the one covering the entrance and security station. He turns down a hallway and never shows up on the next camera down said hall. At this point I logged it as an incident and GTFO right as the relief shift showed up. Next day my boss calls me and says that worker had been on vacation out of state for several days and wouldn't return for several more. Nobody could offer any explanation to what happened. The only way I can explain this one is wishful thinking. My mom and dad were codependent and they liked it that way. They didn't want other people other than the kids. They were completely happy to be just wrapped up in each other. My dad died the day before his birthday in a hospice center. Afterwards, it was like he was still home. His touch lamp beside his recliner would go on by itself. The recliner would rock like someone was getting in it. And sometimes, my mom or my sister would hear my dad saying, "Honey, fix me a cold drink." That was exactly how he'd ask my mom to fill up his massive mug with Sprite over ice. My mother died less than a year and a half later. After my mother died, there was never another sign of either of them being there. They've been gone now for close to 14 years now. When I was a kid, about 10 to 12-ish, I was carrying a load of laundry upstairs home alone while mom was out doing errands. We have this weird carpet runner over our hardwood stairs that's only really attached at the top of the flight, but otherwise not fitted or secured to each individual stair, so naturally I step on an air bubble of carpet with my vision, obscured by the laundry and fall backwards, while bear hugging a bunch of blankets. I specifically remember thinking, "Welp, guess I'm about to die," while almost airborne with just my big toe left on the carpet when I felt two hands, one on either side of my shoulder blades, give me a firm shove that launched me back up on the step and diagonally against the stair rail. I assumed mom somehow silently came back early without announcing herself and turned around to thank her while still clinging to the railing, but no one was there. I scurried upstairs to put my things down while calling her name and walked the house afterwards to check if any doors were unlocked or if her car was there. I finally resorted to calling her cell, where she told me she was heading up a few more stores. It still feels like there's a presence on that stairwell, like someone's watching, but in a protective way rather than sinisterly. Woke up one in the middle of the night to a man standing next to the bed staring at my so. He was slightly translucent, and I figured it was just another sleep paralysis episode, had them before so knew the drill, and rolled over, and went to go back to sleep. Normally being able to move isn't part of sleep paralysis, and immediately my heart began to race as I realized I need to roll over and check what I saw. Person was still standing there, staring at me then he made eye contact with me. Stared at me for a while before turning around and walking to the wall, slowly fading away with each step. Next morning So wakes up looking like shit and said she had the worst night's sleep because she kept having the feeling that someone was watching her. Glad we no longer live in that house. When I was 9 or 10, it was a bad year. I was regularly physically and emotionally abused. But that year, I was sexually abused. On top of all that, I started having serious mental health issues. Well, when things were at their absolute worst, I started having dreams of this blonde lady telling me to hold on. That things would get better. It was so comforting and peaceful and continued as long as the extreme abuse continued. I didn't know who she was, I just figured I imagined her. Well, things finally simmered down, and the dreams stopped. About a year later, Mom was going through old photo albums, and my blood freezes. I see the blonde woman from my dreams. I ask who she is. Turns out, it was an aunt I had who died shortly before I was born. I was about 15 and trying to sleep, but having an asthma attack. Late in the night I started hearing a rhythmic breathing from the floor next to the bed. It wasn't scary, more comforting. And it wasn't me, because my breathing sounded way more fucked up than that. It helped me calm down and get to sleep. Even though I was still sick, I was able to get my hands on an inhaler in the morning. At the time I thought it was a friendly ghost. I later rationalized that maybe I was hearing a family member through the heating ducts. What I realized years later, when I had a dog, was that it had sounded exactly like a big dog sleeping next to the bed. So now I'm 50-50 on whether a ghost dog came to visit me or my own dog time traveled back about 10 years before she was born to comfort me. Not scary but still not explainable. When I was 22, I visited my grandma in her retirement home at Christmas. She was well, nothing out of the ordinary. A few days later I traveled to my then boyfriend across the country. 2 days after New Year's I woke up at 2 a.m. crying. And I just couldn't stop. I wasn't really sad or overly emotional, but the tears just kept streaming down my face. Nothing like that ever happened and I was kind of confused, as was my BF. I fell back asleep a few hours later. 3 days later I was informed that my grandma had died that night at about 2 a.m. Due to the divorce of my parents, communication was difficult and we were only informed after the funeral. I don't believe in anything supernatural, but it's hard to wrap my head around, especially since nothing like this ever happened again. I had a sort of demonic mask on my shelf, and one day, while I was working at my desk no more than 4 feet away from it, it just flew off the shelf and shattered on the floor. It didn't just fall off the shelf, it was like someone threw it across the room. The baffling part to me is that I am the one who made the mask. So I know it's not cursed by some voodoo hex or something. I've had extremely vivid dreams of relatively inconsequential moments in my future life that I nonetheless keep locked away in a little corner of my head, and then when those moments actually occur, I get insane deja vu that throws me off until I remember the dreams. It's a very bizarre thing, but it ultimately doesn't mean much to me. Was in college walking to class. Went to cross a busy street and a hand grabbed my shoulder, quite hard, and stopped me. A car zoomed by that would have killed me. Nobody was behind me or anywhere close enough to have stopped me. Guardian angel. There's a story from when I was 4 to 5 years old. My grandmother was looking through old family photos and asking me who the people were. We got to a picture of my grandfather and she asked me who he was and I said, Poppy Jim. He died suddenly at home when my mother was 10 in the same house we lived in, so I never met him. She asked me how I knew that. I told her, oh, he comes and tucks me in and tells me he loves me sometimes after you go to bed. Super minor compared to many in this thread. Night before Thanksgiving 3 years ago I was across the country at my parents', driving back to theirs with my now wife from a friend's house. As we draw near, there is some type of bundle in the middle of the road. I stopped and pulled off to move it and it turned out to be a barred owl that got clipped by a car. Long story short, I spent the rest of that night getting the owl into a puppy cage, gave it some food and water, and the next day dropped it off at a wildlife rescue center. I got home the next week, all the way across the country, New Jersey to Oregon. I stepped outside and there was a barred owl sitting on my fence watching me. It was gone by the time I got back. But now I know I'm straight with all owls. My siblings and I all had the same dream on the same night a year ago. It was exactly 1 year after my mum died, and we all had a dream about her, and she was in the same place, and was speaking to us. She reassured us that she was okay, and she was with her mum and my dead siblings, and that her dad is in the bad place. The next day we all realized we had the same dream, we even all independently drew a picture of the place we saw her, and wrote down the name of the place it resembled. Most of my siblings took that as an actual message from my mum, but my youngest sister and I like to believe that we have all developed some freaky hive mind low-level telepathy lol. When I was going to my family's home I got in a SUV going down the road. This was in Bangladesh at the time, and after taking the SUV the next 2 hours would be a highway going down a forest. I was sitting shotgun and along the highway there was an old man walking down the highway. He was hitchhiking, and the driver decided to pick him up. He insisted on sitting in my seat and obliged as he was an older man. About an hour down the drive our car collided with a bus and the shotgun seat was mangled up. We all got out and we looked around but we couldn't find the old man that insisted on taking my seat anywhere. Stories like these aren't rare, but I didn't believe them. We all know the man sat in my seat and we all saw him. But he was nowhere to be found. When I was 12 I woke up with a start at 2:30 in the morning. I wasn't dreaming and didn't know why I woke up. My parents told me the next morning that my grandfather had had a heart attack and went for emergency surgery. He died at 2:30 in the morning. Very minor, but I still go WTF when I remember. When I was a kid, around 6, I lived in a very arid area and a wide field of red dirt was between my house and my buds. Every day, walking over there, when I got about halfway across, I'd pick up a dirt clod or a small rock and toss it behind me over my shoulder. About 10 seconds later, it would come flying back over my head and land in front of me. I'd just grin and keep walking. I remember this really distinctly, even trying to replicate it later in childhood after I'd moved away and being sad that it didn't work anymore. Didn't question it as a kid, but looking back, just really weird. Also my job site is haunted, but this seems stranger. I have many, but here's the first that popped in my head. I was driving home from work after picking up my baby late at night. Not many cars around out on the country roads. The one stoplight out there was red for me so I stop. It turns green and have a sudden voice or thought or whatever in my head saying don't go yet. Nothing is coming, I'm still sitting at the green light. Right as I let off the brake, a semi comes flying through his red light. I was shook. Well, when I was around 6 years old I was walking down the stairs, no one was behind me, and all of a sudden I remember getting chills, then feeling a faint hand on my shoulder before I got basically pushed down the stairs. I was alright, a few cuts and bruises, nothing serious, but I still remember the feeling of the invisible hand on my shoulder, it haunts me. My granddad died when I was 7, but, per his own words, I was his absolute favorite, partially because I am the splitting image of his mother, even into adulthood. When I was 21, I was set to give birth to my first son. I was about to get into the elevator to L&D when a man came in saying that he'd volunteer and he'd help me and my husband find our way. The elevator was slow, but we spent the time talking about what a blessing children are and how they grow up so fast. Here's the thing. He looked and sounded exactly like my granddad, same stature, same blue-gray eyes, same faint Scottish-Canadian accent, same khakis, checked shirt and sky blue cardigan. Even spookier is that the nurses said they don't have any older male volunteers in that particular building. I don't really believe in ghosts, but I am absolutely certain Granddad paid me a visit that night. The night my friend took his own life I had a sudden urge to call him. I'm in Canada and he was in Atlanta at the time. I didn't call because I was out partying with friends and got the news the next day when I woke up. I feel like I missed a chance to save a friend, but my dad says it was him letting me know he was gone, but was going to be okay. I'm sorry I didn't reach out, bud. I regret it all the time.